Hello. And welcome to another fantastic, awesome, outstanding beast mode edition of Philip's podcast, or P to the second power. Today's podcast is going to be on lesson 6.2, the Pythagorean Theorem. By the end of this podcast, you should be able to use the Pythagorean Theorem to find the hypotenuse of a right triangle. Vocabulary words. If we're asked to find the hypotenuse, we're going to add the numbers together. We'll talk more about this in a second when we do our example. Leg. A couple vocabulary words that are going to go with our right triangle. Here's my right triangle for our example. By definition, the leg, or I should say the legs, are the two sides of a triangle that form a right angle. Square root. Another word for our square root symbol is radical symbol or radical sign. If I asked you to find the square root of 144, you would just type 144 into your calculator, hit the square root button, and that would give you 12. The reason why it's 12 is because two factors that you can multiply together to get 144 that are the same factor are 12. Sometimes when you do the square root of a number, you end up with a decimal. For example, if I asked you to find the square root of 12, 1 times 12 is 12, but they're not the same factors. 2 times 6 is 12, not the same factors. Plus 10 if you said 3 times 4, but they're not the same factors. So I would take 12, hit the square root or radical sign on my calculator, and that would give me 3.4641016. So sometimes when you find the square root of a number, this is a perfect square plus 10 bears, because a perfect square is a number that you can multiply by itself. Sometimes you're going to get an integer or whole number. Other times when you find the square root of a number, you're going to get a mixed decimal. Already did that one. Hypotenuse. Our hypotenuse, and I will abbreviate. Our hypotenuse is always going to be the longest side of a right triangle, and it's always going to be diagonal or right angle hypotenuse. Squaring a number. Squaring a number means to multiply a number by itself. So if I asked you to square 12, that means you multiply 12 by itself, or 12 times 12, which is 144. If you said 24, 2 words for you. Get small. Here's a right triangle. Anytime we have a right triangle, we can use the Pythagorean theorem. The vocabulary words from before, by definition, the legs are the two sides that form a right angle. Our hypotenuse is opposite the right angle, or I'm going to say diagonal from your right angle, and that hypotenuse is always the longest side. Bam. Chef Emerald would be proud. Here is our formula for the Pythagorean theorem. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. Or just remember, if you forget it on the FCAT, you can always find it on the handy dandy FCAT mathematics reference sheet. There it is on your reference sheet. All right, let's do an example. All right, guys, take a look at this problem. They asked me to find the length of the hypotenuse. I know by definition that hypotenuse is going to be diagonal from my right angle, so letter C is going to be my hypotenuse. In fact, letter C is always going to be your hypotenuse. Letter C is always going to be your hypotenuse. All right. By definition, the two legs form a right angle. So I have a leg here and I have a leg here. And now you have a choice. You can call this leg A and this leg B. Or you can use the commutative property, excellent vocabulary, +10 for your group. And you can say, nope, Mr. Phillips, I'm going to call this B and this A. These two you can change. Ooh, didn't like my spelling. All right, we'll just have to go with this. A and B you can change. Letter C always has to be the hypotenuse. It's kind of like the Cubs. C, Cubs. C, hypotenuse. Cubs always lose. C is always a hypotenuse. All right, I'm going to say A is 12 meters. So I'm going to, excellent vocabulary, +10 for your group. You're going to substitute 12 for A. So I have 12 to the second power, or 12 squared. B is going to be 5 meters. Substitute, nope, you're not getting another 10. You already said it before. 5 for B. Copy the rest of your equation. We said earlier, squaring a number is multiplying it by itself. So when you square 12, that means 12 times 12, or 144. If you told me 12 squared, or 12 to the second power, was 24, epic fail. Squaring 5, that means multiplying 5 by itself. If you said, Mr. Phillips, 5 squared is 25, get big. If you told me 5 squared is 10, I'd say you got small. Copy the rest of your equation. Now you have two choices here. You can do hearts and stars. I beat you to it. I said combine like terms. +10 bears. When I add 144 and 25, that should give me 169. Next thing I'm going to do, the inverse, nice vocabulary word, bears. The inverse of squaring a number is to square root. So I'm going to take the square root of 169. And if you recognize that 169 was a perfect square, excellent. Plus 10 for you. Because 169 hits square root button on your calculator, you get 13. And they are talking about meters, so 13m. Erase a little bit of this gobbledygook. There we go. So the length of my hypotenuse is going to be 13 meters. Now I'm going to show you in just a second something you can do to check, but here's another way you can think of it. Hypotenuse kind of sounds like the word hippo at the beginning. No, not really, but just bear with me. There's a reason why I teach math and not language arts. If you had a hippo for a pet, the hippo would add or will add to your grocery bill. So I was looking for my pet hippo. The hippo will add to my grocery bill. Right here, peeps. You took the two numbers after you squared them, and you added them. So if you're looking for the hippo, the hypotenuse, you have to add the two numbers, then find the square root. Here's a way that you can check your answer to see if it makes sense. We said a hypotenuse, or the hippo, was 13 meters. We said by definition, the hypotenuse has to be the longest side of a right triangle. Ask yourself, is 13 meters longer than 5 meters? Yes, it is. Is 13 meters longer than 12 meters? Yes, it is. So my answer makes sense. If you came up with an answer of 12 meters or 11 meters or anything smaller than 12 meters, then it would be epic fail. Get small, because your hypotenuse always has to be bigger than both of your legs. And 13 meters is bigger than both of your legs. Get rid of the screen shade. We said the length of the hypotenuse is 13 meters. Bada bing, bada boom. And here's our recap. If you're asked to find the hypotenuse, or, remember, our hippo, the hippo is going to add to your grocery bill. So the first thing you're going to do is square the numbers, multiply the numbers by themselves. Right here, I squared the numbers, I multiplied them by themselves. First thing I'm going to do is square the numbers, multiply them by themselves. Second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add the answers together. There we go. I'm going to add the answers together. Right here, I added my answers together. Last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find the square root. Last thing I'm going to do is find the square root. The square root of 169 is 13. So we'll translate this up. Translate this up. There you go. Square the numbers, multiply them by themselves. Add the answers together. Find the square root. Hope that helps you. Find the hypotenuse of the right triangle. Watch for our next podcast on lesson 6.2, finding the leg on a right triangle.